Why does being intelligent so often feel like a curse? Why do the most thoughtful people carry the heaviest burdens? It's not because they're weak, it's because they see too much. They see the cracks in the system, the contradictions in society, the emptiness behind smiling faces and small talk. And the more clearly they see, the harder it becomes to play along. Albert Camus once said, "An intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself." But what he didn't say is how exhausting that can be. To constantly analyze, reflect, observe, not just others, but yourself. To notice your own mind unraveling its own illusions. That's the first sign of real intelligence, and also the first symptom of suffering. Because with intelligence comes awareness. With awareness comes disillusionment. And with disillusionment comes pain. Think about it. The intelligent don't just suffer more often. They suffer more deeply. Because they don't accept simple answers. They question what others ignore. They see the absurdity behind routines, the futility behind goals, and the fragility of everything we call normal. Where others find comfort in tradition, the intelligent see a cage. Where others numb themselves with entertainment, the intelligent see distraction. They notice that society doesn't run on truth, but on performance. That morality often depends on timing, and that human nature isn't noble, it's contradictory, self-interested, and profoundly insecure. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Here's the irony. Intelligence was supposed to be a gift, the key to success, happiness, freedom. But in a world built on illusions, intelligence becomes a burden. It's like being the only person awake in a theater, only to realize the play is poorly written, the actors are pretending, and no one wants to leave. So what do? Pretend to be asleep? Or live with the ache of being awake? This is the dilemma of the intelligent. They feel too much, think too deeply, and suffer too quietly. Because intelligence doesn't just illuminate the world, it exposes its emptiness. And that emptiness is where the pain begins. The average person sees the world and accepts it. The intelligent person sees the world and questions it. And that's the beginning of a slow, silent collapse, not of sanity, but of certainty. Certainty is what keeps people grounded. The belief that everything will work out, that good people win, that hard work pays off. But what if you see too much? What if you realize that outcomes are often random? That bad people rise faster? That injustice is the norm, not the exception? That's not pessimism. That's observation. This is where intelligence becomes a trap. Because once your mind starts noticing patterns, it doesn't stop. It analyzes everything. It sees the gap between what people say and what they mean. It sees how systems are rigged, how language is manipulated, and how history repeats itself often on purpose. It's exhausting. Not because thinking is hard, but because what you see is hard to live with. Take relationships. Most people fall in love with a story, the idea, the illusion. But the intelligent often dissect the experience while they're still in it. Why do I feel this way? Is this real connection or just shared loneliness? Do they love me or the version of me they've invented? It sounds cold, but it's not. It's the burden of self-awareness. To feel something deeply and still not be able to trust it because your mind keeps asking, is this true or just familiar? And the worst part? The more questions you ask, the harder it is to answer the one that matters. Can I be happy knowing what I know? Intelligent people crave knowledge. But most knowledge doesn't soothe, it shatters. They learn history and lose faith in humanity. They study psychology and lose faith in intention. They explore philosophy and lose faith in meaning. What's left? Awareness. Raw, unfiltered awareness. Of death. Of decay. Of the quiet tragedies unfolding behind every smile. This isn't depression. It's exposure. It's the realization that awareness doesn't just open your eyes, it opens your wounds. What do you do when small talk feels like suffocation? When parties feel like performances? When "how are you?" becomes a question you don't know how to answer because the honest version might scare people away? This is the silent grief of intelligence. Not that no one talks to you, but that no one talks with you. The intelligent crave depth. They want realness, authenticity, raw thought. But the world prefers repetition, reassurance, and roles. And so the intelligent often play along. They smile, they nod, they laugh at jokes that bore them. They listen to advice they've already considered and discarded years ago. Not because they're arrogant, but because they've spent so much time thinking that most conversations feel like reruns. This isn't elitism, it's alienation. People often think intelligence is about ideas, but at its core, intelligence is about yearning, a hunger to connect with ideas, with truth, with others. But when you crave honesty in a world trained in politeness, when you long for depth in a culture obsessed with speed, you find yourself alone, even in crowds. You explain too much. You feel too intensely. You see nuances where others want absolutes. And eventually, you stop trying to explain yourself, because it's not just exhausting, it's pointless. Not everyone wants to go where your mind lives. Not everyone can. The trap of intellectual isolation. Here's the paradox. You want to connect, but your clarity isolates you. You want to be known, but your inner world feels untranslatable. So you drift. You become the observer, present but not engaged, surrounded but unseen. People admire your intelligence, but they don't understand your silence. They think you're cold, but really, you're grieving for the connection you can't find. And so the intelligent suffer, not because the world rejects them, but because it doesn't recognize them. To be intelligent is to recognize the masks that people wear. The friend who's always cheerful, but avoids silence. The colleague who overworks, not out of ambition, but fear. The influencer who posts about joy while crumbling in private. Most people don't see it. They're not blind, they're just comfortable. But you notice everything. The nervous micro-expressions. The contradiction between someone's words and their eyes. The stories people tell themselves just to make it through the day. You see it all, and it wears on you. Because intelligence isn't just about data. It's about perception. And perception, at this level, is exhausting. You see pain that others hide. You feel chaos that others deny. You carry truths that others can't even name. But awareness isn't the enemy. It's easy to think that ignorance is bliss, that the unaware are happier, freer, more at peace. And in some ways, they are. But they're also more vulnerable, more easily manipulated, more willing to follow not because they're bad, but because they can't see what you see. So no, awareness isn't the enemy. It's the burden before the breakthrough. Because buried beneath the suffering is a deeper kind of freedom. The freedom to choose your path consciously. The freedom to reject illusions even if it leaves you standing alone. The freedom to build a life not on comfort, but on truth. That freedom isn't painless, but it's real. Here's the truth no one tells you. Pain doesn't mean something is wrong. Sometimes it means you're finally seeing clearly. And in that clarity, there is power. The power to say no to superficiality. The power to stop chasing validation. The power to stop blaming yourself for not fitting in when you were never meant to. The intelligent suffer not because they're broken, but because they refuse to go numb. And that refusal is a form of integrity. Pain becomes a compass, a filter, a guide that says, "This is not for me." And slowly, you begin to trust it. Let's be honest. There are days when you wish you didn't know what you know, when you envy those who live more simply, who wake up, follow routines, believe what they're told, and don't ask why. But would you trade places? Would you really give up your mind just to feel lighter? That question haunts many intelligent people, and the answer is rarely simple. But here's what's true. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not overthinking. You are just aware. And in a world designed to dull your perception, awareness is a form of quiet rebellion. The pain of awareness is not a flaw, it's a signal that you are conscious, that you are paying attention, that you still care even when it hurts. And in a culture that thrives on distraction, that kind of awareness is rare, maybe even sacred. Because what do intelligent people really want? Not applause, not agreement, not even answers, just truth. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts, because that's where meaning lives. You may never be able to unsee what you've seen, but you can learn to carry it differently. You can turn pain into perspective, loneliness into solitude, disillusionment into discernment. You can become the kind of person who knows and still chooses to care, who understands the darkness and still creates light, who walks alone sometimes but never in despair. Because you're not empty, you're deep. And that depth, when nurtured, becomes wisdom. So here's the truth. Yes, intelligent people suffer more, but not without reason. They suffer because they feel, because they notice, because they know. But in that knowing is the seed of something powerful, the ability to live on your own terms, to seek truth in a world of performances, to find beauty in pain and strength in sensitivity. And if that resonates with you, you're not alone. You never were. We are taught that pain is a problem, a mistake to be corrected, a glitch in the emotional system that needs fixing. But what if that isn't true? What if pain, especially the pain of awareness, is not a flaw, but a signal? Not something to silence, but something to listen to. A sign that something deep inside you refuses to accept the lie. That you see the truth and are unwilling to look away, even when it hurts. Because sometimes pain isn't dysfunction. It's the mind's resistance to conformity. It's the soul's protest against mediocrity. It's the body's response to being forced into a shape it never chose. And for the intelligent, that pain shows up early. You start asking questions when everyone else is memorizing answers. You feel more deeply when others are coasting on autopilot. You get called too much by people who've spent their lives being not enough. So you internalize the idea that you're the problem, when in truth, you were the signal. The canary in the coal mine. The reminder that not everyone is asleep. Depth is not convenient. It slows things down. It complicates easy answers. It makes people sit with discomfort instead of skipping ahead to conclusions. But intelligent people live in that depth. They don't just want to know what, they want to know why. They don't just read stories, they feel them in their bones. They don't just hear opinions, they question the motives beneath them. That kind of depth intimidates people, not because it's wrong, but because it reveals something many would rather not confront. Their own fear of feeling. You walk into a room and speak plainly, honestly, directly, and people recoil, not because you're cruel, but because they're used to smiling through fakeness, used to silence where there should be questions, used to approval over truth. You aren't difficult. You're honest. You aren't broken. You're awake. We have to shatter this illusion that being emotionally sensitive makes you weak. It doesn't. It makes you dangerous, because it means you notice. You feel the tension in the room. You sense when something is off, even if no one says it. You catch the micro-expressions, the half-truths, the quiet contradictions. And still you show up. You stay open. You allow yourself to care. That's not softness. That's strength in its most sacred form. And that strength costs you. It isolates you. It overwhelms you. Because there's no off switch, no mute button. But that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you've chosen to live in alignment with your full humanity. And most people never do. You are never broken, just misaligned. The world is not designed for people like you. It's designed for predictability, compliance, speed. You move slowly, thoughtfully. You want meaning, not momentum. Questions, not scripts. Truth, not performance. So you feel out of sync not with yourself, but with your surroundings. And you try to adapt, to speak in ways that won't confuse people, to shrink your observations into something more palatable, to smile when you're supposed to smile, even when you feel like screaming. Eventually, you start wondering, what's wrong with me? But the better question is, what if nothing's wrong with you and everything's wrong with the template you were given? You were told to fit a mold that wasn't built for you, to chase goals you never chose, to define success by standards that don't nourish you. And when you couldn't make it all work, they said you needed to fix yourself. But here's the truth. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be reclaimed. There's a kind of freedom that no one talks about. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. Not the freedom to be loud or liked. But the freedom to know yourself without apology. To feel what you feel without asking permission. To think what you think even when it's inconvenient. To walk into a room full of masks and choose not to wear one. That's not rebellion. That's alignment. And people notice. Not always with admiration, sometimes with resentment. But they notice. Because a person who has clarity, even in suffering, radiates something rare. Not perfection. Not happiness. But groundedness. A kind of settled discomfort. A knowing pain. A quiet refusal to play roles that insult your depth. That, too, is strength. You've likely spent years waiting for someone to validate you. To see you, to tell you, yes, the world is absurd. Yes, Your depth is real. Yes, this pain does mean something. But what if that validation never comes? Then you have two choices. Keep waiting or wake up. Stop seeking permission and start authoring your own meaning. Because the pain of awareness is only unbearable when you think you're alone. But you're not. There are others walking this same crooked path. Others who feel too much, think too deeply, suffer more quietly than anyone suspects. And when you stop apologizing for your depth, you start recognizing them. That's how you find your people. Not by dimming your light, but by refusing to hide it anymore. If this made you feel seen, stay with me for the next one. Subscribe and keep walking this path with me. Because the world may never get easier, but it can become clearer. And that clarity is a gift worth carrying.